gentlemen, welcome back to some more Unreal Engine 4 excitement. In this episode, we will be covering the MasterMaterial Pipeline and what that means exactly and how it may be beneficial to your projects. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, the first things that you will need to follow along with this tutorial is the kite demo, because I am pulling textures from the kite demo because the kite demo has a lot of really high quality assets in it, and it is by far probably one of the most useful things Epic has released in terms of just raw content. If you're creating outdoor environments, it just has a lot of stuff that even if you're not using like their objects, there's still a lot of stuff in there that you can just pull from and just build your own stuff with. I'm also using the props rock from the starter content, and we will be replacing its material with our own. But the reason why I picked it is because it has a baked ambient occlusion map that comes with it, and so we will be using that ambient occlusion map for as a mask to mix material functions together to create our overall effect. We will then be using instances based off of the master material to dial in our settings, make duplicates of the asset, and make some fairly radical changes to how it all comes together without having to create a brand new material. And that's kind of the crux of why you'd want to perhaps use the master material pipeline in your workflow, because it just gives you a lot of options to both make iterative changes, both just real time, but also to be able to go back into the master material, make changes, and have those changes automatically populate out to the rest of your content automatically without having to do anything tedious like going to each object after it's already been created and go reapply these changes to every single asset. So I should say to keep that down to a minimum, because obviously at some point everything is made unique, but within reason. And of course you can keep everything down to various levels of classes. You can make it so that it is a very smart and very flexible pipeline, and flexibility is key here. So let's go get started, and we're going to just create a master material. So we're going to call it rock_master mat. And Matt is not a person we know, it is Matt for material. And so let's go ahead and create our instance. And we're going to actually take Matt and the underscore out of that, so it's just master instance. So now we can differentiate these two rather easily. I have already pulled all the textures I need from the kite demo and from the rock space textures, so that we can go ahead and very quickly reference these into our materials. So the next step is going to be creating our first material function. So we want to right click, go to materials and textures, and then material function. So here we're going to call it base rock, or it could be rock base. Whichever makes more sense to you. And I actually do like to throw an underscore mf for material function at the end of that. So we have mf, we have instance, and mat as our final character, so we can easily distinguish what is what. You could also throw your material functions into a kind of a subfolder that you can pull up from to add to your master material. So let's go ahead and double click on that and open it up. And so you can see right away that the output from a material function is slightly different than a regular material. If you were to go to the master material and just kind of see what see what the differences are, in case you are not quite familiar with that. Essentially, a standard material has all these inputs like base color, metallic spec, rough, etc., that you would plug your textures into. However, the material function doesn't have that. It basically just has a one in and one out type of input-output system. So in order to combine textures into that, we're going to have to create a make material attributes node. And so we go ahead and drag that in, and then connect the output from that into the input of the output result. Well, input-output talking here, but basically what it's doing is taking all these inputs and baking it down into a single channel. And so that will make it easier for us to create masks for entire material groups later on down the process. And it's part of why I like using the material functions to create some simple material sets and then mask them together in the master material. So let's go ahead and just grab the textures from the rock. And so I know, because I created this folder, we want those and we want this. So it's going to be the T-Rock basalt diffuse, T-Rock mesh mask, and the T-Rock mesh normal, and the T-detail rocky normal textures. We're going to go ahead and drag that in. And of course we could have copied and pasted the setup from the rock texture, or the rock base material itself, but we don't really need to, because this is pretty simple. So we want a normal blend angle corrected normals. I want to plug that in. We want to plug this one in as the base, and this one in as the additional normal, and we're going to plug that into the normal channel. So let's just move that down for the sake of readability. Kind of bring this in close. I know, because I am familiar with the other material, that the red channel contains the occlusion map that we want. And of course we want to plug in the generic rock texture into our base texture. And of course we want to create a texture coordinate, and we're going to drop down a constant, and we're going to drop down a multiply, plug that in there, this over, put that to 1, plug this into our detail texture, and plug this into our detail normal map. And so there we are. That is by and large everything we need. So let's go ahead and set up our specular channel, and we're going to set that to 0.5, and we're going to create our roughness. I'm going to go 0.6 because I know that's what the material was set to before. And of course we just typed way too many craziness in there, so 0.5. Okay. So there we have a very standard, very basic material setup. The next thing we need to do is set these up so they're all material parameters, so that we can make changes to these particular texture inputs and constant values later on down the line. So let's convert these to parameters. We're going to call these spec. And it would help if I hit the right buttons. Spec. Roof. And we're going to call this parameter detail, texture, tile, mult. And these guys convert to parameter, and we're going to call this detail diff. We're going to call this AO, and call this normal, and we're going to call this detail normal. All right. So the next step, of course, is to give all these a singular group name. Of course, because these are a slightly different place in the thing, they don't mix well when you have the other one selected. So we're gonna do rock base, and select those. Rock base, like that. Rock base, and hit apply. So we have our first material function set up. Let's go back up to our main thing. So here in a second, that should bake down to an image. And we're going to create a second material function. This one is going to be called dirt. And go ahead and open this one up. Get it over so you can see it, and we're just going to grab these two alpine patch textures, the diffuse and normal, drop it in. And if you missed how I set up the other material function, I'm going to do it here again. So we're going to create a make material attributes. We're going to plug that into the output result. We're going to plug this into the base color. We're going to plug this into the normal. And we're going to create a spec and rough parameters, and that's going to be 0.5. That's going to be 0.6. And we're going to do another texture coordinate. Drag that down. Drop down a scalar constant and a multiply. And plug that into there. Plug that into there. And set that to 1. And just, again, we're going to set up our parameters. So this is going to be diff tile normal tile spec rough. Well, that's a weird way to spell it, but sure. Yeah, I guess it's right. Right enough. Yeah, I guess that's how I spelled it there too. Just looks weird to me, but that's fine. Write that to parameter, and we're going to call this dirt tile mult. And then we're going to name this group. We're going to call it dirt. Grab these. Select dirt from the list. Grab this. Select dirt from the list. And hit apply. Alrighty then. So now we have these two material functions. So let's go ahead and open up our master material. Bring this over so you can see it. And we're going to grab these two material functions, drag them in. So the first thing you're probably wondering, if you've never done this before, is how do you plug these into the output for the material? The simple thing is you want to have your material base selected, and click on use material attribute. And essentially what that does is it collapses everything down to a single input that you can then connect these to. However, you can connect one to it, but if you go to connect another one to it, it can only have a singular input. So what we need to do is we need to set up a mask for that. So we're going to go layer, standard, material layer standard. And we're going to plug our base into the base of that, our dirt into the top of that. And now we need an alpha. Now, like I said before, I want to use the ambient occlusion as the alpha. And if I really wanted to, I could select that type in break, and we could break the material attributes out so that we could grab the ambient occlusion. But here's the thing. If you are setting up a pipeline to quickly swap out different material functions or function groups, you may not have a baked occlusion in a particular texture set for an object. So you want to leave that everything in there to be either tileable or locked to a particular coordinate setup, like 1 to 1 or 2 to 2 or whatever, so it's square with the UV. So instead of doing that, what we're actually going to do is we're going to go back to our rock, or base rock material, and we're actually going to copy that node, paste it here. Because it's already a parameter, we're going to want to rename it really quick so that it's not always tied to that particular thing. And we're going to go master. And this is not going to be the AO, but it's going to be a mask. Now, what we could do is actually completely replace the AO in here with this one and plug it in with another node. And we'll probably do that, but for now, we don't need to do that. So let's go ahead, and first thing we need to do, because we're going to use this as a mask, we're going to need to do a component mask. So type in mask, grab component mask from the list, drag that down, connect the main output to that, and isolate just the red channel. Now we're going to create a lerp because we want to add some controls to this. And we're going to just drop down a couple of constant vectors, or I'm sorry, constant scalar values, and drag that into there, drag that into there. And then, because this is always important, we're going to create a clamp so that these values are never going into HDR. Otherwise, you'll get some funky results. So let's go ahead and plug that in. And we're going to set these up as parameters. We're going to name this mask lerp A. Copy that. Right here, paste, and change that last letter to a B. Select these both, and select the master group. And save. Plug this into the to the output, so it's all connected. And hit apply again. And so, if we were to open our rock master instance, we now have everything we could possibly change out. Well, not everything we could possibly change out, but everything that, for this case, that is potentially useful for swapping around. And so let's go ahead and apply this instance to the rock that's in our scene. So with that selected, click apply. And as you can see here, and it might be a little bit hard to see, but currently we have the dirt map on top of the rock. So we're going to want to go into our master values, go into the A input, switch that to 1, go into the B input, set that to 0, and now that's only kind of growing from, the recesses. Excuse me. And as you can see, it updated in real time as I changed the value. So I can increase that. So, we can kind of force it to spread out as much as we possibly can. I can take the other value and just really crush it down so that we can isolate to exactly, where we want on a really hard edge. Obviously, getting too close to that, things start to fall apart. So let's kind of reset that. This one, actually, I think I want on the outside. So let's go ahead and increase that. We want that as 1. And we want to start to force it out of the recesses, but at the same time, try to make it cover the outside as much as we possibly can. Okay, so now we have kind of our first kind of base rock. So let's go ahead and just duplicate this. And now we want to make this a unique flower unto itself. So let's grab our instance and we're going to duplicate our instance and we'll let it be called instance 2. And with the new duplicate selected, we'll apply that to its material in the world. I'm not actually applying it in the object properties because I don't want to lose its original material association. So I'm doing it within the actual in-level actor, in case any of you were curious. So let's bring our new instance up. And let's change this up a bit. So we're going to take this grass texture and plug it into the diffuse channel there. And it's accompanying normal map as well. This time, we're going to set that to 0 and that to 1. That to 1 and that other one to 0. So now the grass exists only in the cracks. And so we'll increase this value here. And so now we have a very distinctly different material that exists only in the material instance, but because of everything's related, any changes we make to the master material will apply to both. So let's go ahead and set that up. Let's find our master material. Make sure that's open somewhere. It's probably open. Let me just close all my windows so we make sure we get the latest updated interface. Sure, let's save that and close it. Open it up. All right, so now, say for example, you want to make it so the grass texture only applies from the world position up vector. So let's go vertex normal world space. And we're going to create a static switch parameter. And we want a component mask. Do we need that? Yes, we do. Sorry, doing this off the cuff. I want to set that to blue because if we start previewing this node here, we know that the blue value is top down. Right? So if I turn it all on, you kind of get your different axes. Right? Red is from that direction. Green is from that direction. Blue is from that direction. So what we're going to do is set up an override for this mask for this mask. All right, so if it's true, that goes into there, and if that's true, it goes into there. Or if that's false, it goes into there. And hit apply. Now, we could set up a similar lerp function for this as well. So potentially, you could actually set it up to come into here as well, and then still have the same lerp control. So you know what? Let's go ahead and do that instead. So that will actually get us the same thing without having to replicate controls. All right. There we go. Sorry about that. I had an epiphany as I was working, and that sometimes happens. So we're going to save that. And now, because the default for that is off, right? Oops, I want that. Yeah, the default for that is off. So let's go into our second material instance. And let's close that and reopen it just to make sure it's refreshed. And all right, because I didn't put it in the group, it's down here, but we can turn that on. And it'll take a second to rebake. But then when we hit the switch, we've now changed the value. And of course, we need to adjust these inputs here. So let's reset them. So now we've adjusted these inputs so that the same material only applies grass from the world facing up position. And if I were to rotate said object, say, I was using it as a brush or something, it now dynamically places the grass always on top, all from the same master material. And that was a feature I added after I had already set all this up. So when setting up these complex materials, all you need to do to repopulate everything is to start off basically, with a basic setup, and just add functionality as you go. And you can create the switches to turn features on and off. You can do whatever you need to do in order to set up the functionality so that you can turn stuff on and off. Now, maybe part of you wants to, or some of you, I should say, not part of you. Maybe my left leg wants to, but maybe my right leg doesn't. Have it set up so that you can use these two functions to blend together, and you can do that. You could probably do that with a lerp as opposed to a switch. But it is a more complicated setup in terms of you have to have another layer of additional controls, where I was reusing the same controls to do the mask blending, right? So that's why I set it up that way. And so, that kind of stuff, it just works. And that's one of the beauties of Unreal Engine 4, is that for the most part, stuff just works. What else? Oh, yeah. And so, as you can see here, under our texture samples, and this comes down to how to make things run a little bit more efficiently. So this is kind of like the addendum part. I know I started to wrap up and stopped, and I apologize for that. But we're currently using 10 of 16 texture samples. That's not really ideal. So let's go ahead and open up each one of these things. Select all your texture samples. And you're going to want to maximize this so you can see it. Select sample source. You want to go to shared wrap. And this is something I actually learned recently from one of the Epic devs on the Unreal forums. And you're going to want to do the same thing in here. Shared wrap. Save. Make sure that's also hits save. It did. And we want to go into the master material and just make sure that this is set to the same thing and hit save. Let it compile. And now you see we've gone from 10 of 16 down to 4 of 16. And we could probably even get it even lower if I take the ambient occlusion out of the other one and just use this one. And let's go layer blend AO. All right, so then we plug this one to here. Oops. This into here. And drag that into there. And then that into there. And so now we can do that. And literally just remove that, hit save. And what does it say? So now we're at 3 of 16. So we now have greater range in which to expand this material before we hit our texture sample cap, which is going to be the biggest limitation out of any of our various inputs and what have you, especially if you're doing like terrain. Terrains are always going to have like more stuff, more instructions, more texture samples than just about anything you want. And this is a very similar process, and you would probably want to use a very similar process when dealing with landscape textures. So, you know, keep that in mind next time you go to do a landscape texture. But a little bit of obsessive compulsive disorder with node flows, but again, we've kept everything very easy to read. And let's just save again. Let these bake out. And let's see, just make sure lighting's built just to make everything look as pretty as possible as I do my wrap up. So I want to thank you all for watching. If you like this kind of video, please hit the like button and please subscribe to my channel. It will help me a lot with understanding, you know, what you guys you know, like with the videos in general. So, you know, like the more likes I get on a particular video, I know to do more of those types of videos. Subscribing to my channel benefits you guys as much as it benefits me. Anytime I release a video, it will automatically send you guys a little prompt saying, hey, look, so-and-so, you know, Bookman's released a new video. You know, you might be interested in that. You know, please go watch it at your leisure. And with that, I'm gonna just say goodbye. So again, everyone, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.